It's often been said that the only people who call the 50s fabulous are those who were born too late to have lived through them. Nostalgia and ignorance tend to erase those things better left forgotten and to romanticize what is left. This was the Eisenhower era, a period when a strange mixture of post-World War II pride and paranoia combined to change America from a frontier continent full of go-getter philanthropy for world liberty into a conservative, reactionary nation of the proverbial men in flannel suits. Burgeoning consumerism could scarcely conceal the fear and suspicion stewing beneath America's optimistic facade. After all, this was also the time of McCarthyism, the Cold War, and the generally accepted belief that one could survive an atom bomb explosion by falling to the ground and covering one's head with a coat. However, the growing consumerism kept the record industry, among others, moving full steam ahead. Technological advances changed how people listened to music. The stepped-up use of the lightweight 45 RPM disc rendered the 78 RPM disc obsolete, and in 1953, record sales hit an all-time high of $205 million. With the introduction this year of high fidelity, a new quality standard for mono recordings, record sales would go even higher. But what was on most of those records was another matter entirely. Culturally, the heady, swinging sophistication of previous decades had given way to a self-conscious, neutered coyness. Romantic love was depicted in music and film as a rare, abstract concept, and any references to sex were strictly forbidden. This year, the most popular song in America was John Turner's "Oh My Papa," a sentimental ode to filial love and respect. It became a #1 hit for Eddie Fisher, who, though a typically well-groomed, inoffensive, adult crooner, was also young and handsome and sang romantic songs and thus was an idol of teenage girls. When he performed in New York, one concert review was headlined, "Eddie Fisher Rocks Kids at Carnegie." It now seems absurd to think of Eddie Fisher and the word rock in the same phrase. Dull as such musical fare may seem to us now, however, earlier generations were as enthusiastic about it as later generations would be about their own music. Indeed, the screams Eddie Fisher inspired at Carnegie Hall probably were somewhat analogous to the effects rock concerts would soon have on young audiences. And there is the rub, for beneath America's seemingly moribund exterior, something was brewing, something that would deliver what young audiences may have been too repressed to realize they wanted and needed. A less adulterated brand of excitement and, yes, even sex in the form of rock and roll. In 1954, the fastest-growing segment of the record business, for the first time ever, was rhythm and blues, the post-war hybrid of blues and big band horns by colored musicians, and the people buying those records were white teenagers, what are often considered the first rock and roll records. Bill Haley and the Comets' Rock Around the Clock and the Chords' Shaw Boom entered the pop chart this year. In June, Elvis Presley made his first recordings. The post-war baby boom was beginning to flower, and sweeping changes it would bring appeared as mere fleeting aberrations. For example, the Midnighters' sexually explicit "Work With Me Annie" provoked controversy over and the banning of countless off-color R&B and pop songs, but to little or no avail. They sold thousands of copies anyway. Cleveland disc jockey Alan Freed, the man credited with having coined the term rock and roll, attracted a sellout throng of 10,000 to the first rock and roll dance concert he'd held outside his home base in Newark, New Jersey. Then, the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency opened hearings to determine the effects on America's youth of rock and roll music, films, and television shows. At the time, rock and roll seemed a threat, but certainly one that authorities and interested parties believed they could control and ultimately banish from the American scene. Though it may not have been obvious back then, the battle lines for a cultural revolution were being drawn. Stay tuned to Rock-A-Steria for a summary of the year 1955 and check out our reels showcasing every significant date in music for each and every year of rock history.